And one thing I will say is we bring over Alexander William Salter, a contributor for Young Voices. He is an economics professor in the Rawls College of Business at Texas Tech University. And he has co authored an opinion article in The Hill titled Congress Can Restore the Integrity of the Dollar. I'm sitting here thinking, one of my radio friends said, does freedom of speech probably does stop at the Thanksgiving table? So we're going to bring Alexander over and we're going to talk about that. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, we did. Freedom of speech continued only to a certain point, though.
As is probably prudent when food and company is on the line.
Exactly, exactly. We had a wonderful Thanksgiving. My husband and I traveled for it's only about 7.5 hours, Pennsylvania, ended up being another hour and a half. We made it. We're still sane. We had an amazing time with my brother, my sister-in-law, my parents, and my father, who's never worked for the union in his life. He is a consultant on many levels. We were decorating the house for Christmas, and I was not done yet. And I looked, and he was sitting in the chair, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm on my union break." I said, "What the heck?" I said, "Okay, all right, okay, I'll give you 10 more minutes." But I just sat there and kind of chuckled. My dad is very conservative, very faith based, biblical, and he loves Young Voices and he loves when you guys come to the show. So I know he's extremely excited about this morning. I was reading your article. Can Congress restore the integrity of the dollar? Or should I say, can the Republicans restore it? Or should I say, now that Nancy is scooting away, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I read your article and I noticed that you co authored with former Congressman David Bratt. And I love the article, but what has been your response, especially it being in the Hill?
There's been a pretty positive response, I'd say. I think that given how much of an issue inflation is, just how much
Mm-hmm.
it's hurting Americans' pocketbooks, there
Mm-hmm.
really is more of an appetite now than in decades, I would say, to reforming our monetary system. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be an insanely difficult fight. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of making sure we can actually stabilize the dollar's purchasing power and sort of slay the inflationary beast, I think it's a fight that's worth having.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite quotes in your article, you call the Fed the behemoth organization. Okay, that's just fabulous. It is a monster. But one thing, there are a couple things I took from your article, and I really want to talk about this. Okay, $6 trillion during the COVID-19 years. $6 trillion, not billion, $1 trillion. And then we are talking about the new Congress. Obviously, we're kind of in a lame duck session right now. So you mentioned three current bills. Talk to me about the breakdown of those three bills put out by Republicans. And I want to also go to the next piece after that. Alex Mooney, Republican, West Virginia, talks about binding the federal hand. So talk to me about the three bills and then Mooney's bill specifically.
Happy to. As you noted, all three were introduced by Republicans, although I think that there's a chance that moderate Democrats could get on board as well.
Okay.
People understand which way the winds are blowing, and Americans hate, hate, hate inflation. Well, if they want to stop seeing their wages eroding, we need to reform the monetary system. And so I think that there is a chance for a moderate bipartisan coalition here.
Okay.
Again, it's a long shot, but it's the best shot that we've had in a while. So
Okay.
these three bills that we focus on in the opinion piece are various proposed reforms to America's central bank. One of them focuses on stabilizing the purchasing power of the dollar directly,
Mm-hmm.
basically removing from the Fed's mandate the so-called full employment plank.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the Fed has a dual mandate from Congress to pursue full employment and stable prices. Well, if you know anything about economics, you know that the only way the Fed can do anything for unemployment is by stabilizing prices, by
Mm-hmm.
keeping what economists call aggregate demand stable, by
Mm-hmm.
propping up the purchasing power of the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So, really, the employment plank is redundant. There's no reason for it to be there. It's not doing any work, and all it's doing is giving central bankers cover for pursuing mischief that's outside of their mandate. So,
Mm-hmm.
by focusing the Fed 100% on a stable dollar, we can improve monetary policy and help Americans get some relief that way. The other two bills are in the service of what I call the nuclear option. Rather than just reforming the Fed's mandate, we're actually talking about going for gold, talking about
Yes.
restoring the
Yes.
commodity standard and putting the dollar back on a gold standard. The gold standard is much maligned in economic circles, but for really no good reason. If you look at overall economic growth, if you look at business cycles, if you look at financial crises, all of these things that we experience today are no better than they were before. And in
Mhm.
fact, some of the measures are look much worse,
Mhm.
right? In terms of how the Fed has actually performed in terms of its discretionary power to maintain monetary policy, it has not contributed to US economic stability. All
Mhm.
we really get is inflation with no increased compensation and economic stability to make up
Right.
for it. So,
Right.
given that, why not do what we know has worked before? Gold backed money is history's most successful monetary rule, and we should give it another look.
So let me ask you this. Something that he also highlighted, and maybe no, you highlighted this: American money is controlled, and it should be controlled by the market, but it's being controlled by the government. Is that a fair assessment of what you said in the article? Help me come to that understanding
Mhm.
in regards to. So I'm sitting here and being a poli sci broadcast journalism major. So economics was my dad's space, and I loved learning from him. But talk to me about the fact: is it better if looking at what Biden is doing from the standpoint of the feds and the government, what what do we need to be, in layman's terms, what do we need to be aware of? How much more is the government going to be in our back pocket? And do we need to, let me ask you this, do we need to be continuing to take money out of our bank accounts and our savings? Do we need to be putting them in some other aspect? Talk to me about the market versus federal government being in our pockets.
Great question. The line that you quoted is itself a quote. It's legislative language from one of the bills. And the
Mhm.
way it works is like this. Right now, the money supply is determined by the central bank of the United States. And by that, I mean the most narrow measure of the money supply, what economists call the monetary base.
Mhm.
The question is that really the best system that we have for determining the basic money supply? I don't
Mhm.
think so. I
Okay.
think that if we actually put the basic money supply on the gold standard, markets would actually work better. It's
Mhm.
about reducing the ability for bureaucrats who really have no effective check or control on their behavior to act discretionarily and basically change the money supply willy nilly to pursue technocratic goals. That's
Mhm.
not working for the American people.
Right.
We're seeing what's happening because of that.
Right.
Record price increases, right? We're seeing 40-year high inflation. So it's clear that what's going on right now is not the way that you want to go.
Mhm.
If you can stabilize at its basic level the dollar by tying it to gold, you create a strong foundation for economic prosperity. It's like this: as long as everybody knows the length of a meter, we can
Mhm.
all run the road race, right? We can
Right.
all go run the race before we
Yep.
have our Thanksgiving turkey, right? Do our
Yep.
turkey trot. But if the definition of a meter is constantly changing, we don't know how to pace ourselves. We're
Right.
not going to be able to run a good race. We're going to be bumping into each other. We're going to run too fast, too slow. It's about getting the basic rules of the game right. And so,
Mhm.
if we can get that weight or measure that is the purchasing power of the dollar on a strong foundation, that's going to give markets the certainty they need to
Mhm.
deliver stability in the short run and economic growth in the long run. It's a
Mhm.
winning proposition for Americans all around.
Yeah, you had mentioned in the article, I noticed the blurred lines on the fiscal responsibility. And, with a new Congress and Republicans taking over the House, at least, and we will know maybe more on the Senate with the Herschel Walker, Georgia aspect soon. But with the Republicans being back control of the House, do you think some of those blurred lines would actually change for the better? Or do you think Obama, Biden, as I call the administration, is going to come in and just pull executive order after executive order? What are your thoughts on that from the fiscal responsibility that Republicans are known for, the conservative fiscal responsibility? What are your thoughts on that for the new Congress?
Right. Well, unfortunately, lame duck Congresses, even before
Yep.
an upcoming divided Congress, are not exactly known for
Nope.
fiscal prudence.
No, they're
There
not.
is this, I do anticipate that we're going to get an emergency bill to avert a shutdown that's going to be just throwing more money at a broken problem.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
broadly, though, it's true that Republicans have a record of fiscal prudence and financial stability, but in recent years, they've kind of squandered that.
Hmm.
Before President Biden, the largest runner of deficits was President Trump, even before the COVID years.
Yeah.
So I think that if Republicans want to recover their credibility on fiscal matters to the public, they really have to take advantage of divided government and teach the American people, make the case to the public why fiscal prudence is actually in their interest.
Hmm.
Everybody understands why they want the government to keep on spending. There's always an interest group that wants more money. it's much harder to understand why we actually need to get control of this process.
Hmm.
And if we don't, the only thing that's going to happen is that the central bank, the Federal Reserve, is going to continue to indirectly monetize these deficits. So
Hmm.
unless you control the fiscal problem, you're inviting more of the inflation problem through the back door. I think that Republicans can and should restore their own credibility in terms of running a sound fiscal house, because that's going to do the most good for the American people in terms of eliminating the conditions that cause central banks to run the printing presses and drive up prices.
Well, I mean, you said quite a few things in just that one statement. And, I sit there and say, and I've said this before in our conversations because I go back to it. I have my girlfriend Money Talk with Melanie on all the time. She talks about the dollars and cents of the kitchen table, and she's very good at breaking that down for the working mom and the retiree and the elderly and what's ahead for our military and our veterans fiscally. And I sit there and say the blurred lines, and we need to teach. I really I put the pressure back on the Republicans. I put the pressure back on those newly elected. Like you said, lame duck, you never get anything done. We know that. Well, most of us know that. But for those who are really just focused on 9 to 5, 9 to 6, getting kids back and forth, making sure there's food in the refrigerator and gas in the tank, I sit there and say, we voted for these people at the polls. We want the best for the nation, but at the end of the day, I always say to people, follow the money, because it's clearly not in our pockets. So where is the money? And, I have trouble trusting even the Republicans that are up there, because they have not proven anything to me other than maybe Mooney saying, let's get some work done and let's bind these guys. But I don't see that from too many people up there. I see more of them now. And I this is what I love about my show. I can rant until YouTube takes me down. But I was out there for a long time, and I loved how we kept the doors open for people to come in and meet with their elected officials. And now it has this elite feeling to, well, we are better than you. You are the lower, you are the people in modern day Russia, and you no longer have that importance. We're up here and you're down here. And it really shows when it comes to them and the finances and them working off of a deficit and not a budget. We have to budget in our own homes. But why are we not holding them accountable? Why are people not saying more? Okay, that's my rant.
It's
um,
a good one.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just infuriating to see what is happening. Being in Pennsylvania, all the way down here to North Carolina, and I keep saying to people who saw me run for the state of North Carolina, I'm kind of looking at Florida right now. They have a really good example of how things are going so well for them, because you are living with, there is accountability. Talk to me about Texas. Is it the same thing for you guys there, knowing that you are in Texas and you just got back from Florida?
A lot of stuff going on there. I'll start by saying that one of my favorite expressions is trusting politicians of any party is un American. This
Exactly.
country is founded on not trusting politicians. And so I think we
Exactly.
have to keep that healthy distrust alive.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. This is a kitchen table issue, because
Yeah.
what we're seeing with this inflation is very similar to what we've seen with past inflations.
Hmm.
What goes up first? The prices of the goods and services that we consume.
Yeah.
Food, energy, obviously, those are the most volatile, but now we know that this inflation is broad based. The price of everything is going up. Americans are being asked to be happy about the fact that the rate of increase of prices is going down, as if the fact that some things are going up 6% per year rather than 8% per year is something to write home about. No, we should be furious,
Right.
because what happens is those prices rise first before wages do, which means your purchasing power is steadily eroding. You're
Yes.
working hard. You've got a household to run. You've got a life to live. You've got a family to provide for. The government, at minimum, should not be laying additional burdens on your back by
Yes.
causing prices to rise faster than wages. But that's exactly what's happening with this inflationary episode. Now, you can push back against that with good public policy at the state and local level, try and give people some relief that way.
Hmm.
And that's when I think the models that we're currently seeing in Texas and Florida that are
Yeah.
very successful, if we're
Yeah.
judging by the internal migration patterns, right? Everybody wants to come to Texas, everybody wants to come to Florida.
Right.
There's a reason for that, because these state governments are, for the most part, getting the government off their backs and trying to give them some relief. Now,
Hmm.
that's not always a good idea. I'm sorry, that is always a good idea, regardless of whether inflation is high or low.
Right.
Prices are going up 8%. Even if inflation was zero, right, you would still want to minimize costly regulations. But there's an argument to be made that that's more salient to the public when they're currently hurting from something else like inflation.
Right.
Right? Good supply side policy is always a good idea, even when
Mhm.
inflation, which is a demand side issue, is going bad. That being said, I think that people really appreciate relief that might come now from governors, from state legislatures. And so that's why you're going to see more, I think, people looking to leave behind failed state and local government models in blue states that aren't working and head to
Yeah.
places like Texas and Florida.
Yeah, I sit there and think about that because my parents are retirees, and I sit there and think about elderly as well. It's really going to affect the elderly population more and more. And I'm curious to see what the numbers are going to look like for Texas and Florida, and even South Carolina and Georgia as they continue to move down to these warmer climates, not just for the warmer climates, but because of the money and the fiscal policy issues in the blue states. I completely agree with you on that. Okay, so you heard me ask Kenny Shu earlier on the stocking stuffer. Does your book fit into a stocking for Christmas? And talk to us about your book.
My book absolutely fits into a stocking, and I know
Okay.
that because I've tested it. We have empirical evidence, as economists like to say. We've got the controlled experiment. Yes, it does fit into a stocking. It's called Money and the Rule of Law,
Yes.
Generality and Predictability in Monetary Institutions, which is just a fancy economist way of saying, hey, we take this idea of the rule of law seriously in all of our public institutions. The foundation of the American experiment is the rule of law. The idea that not just the citizens, but the government also has to follow the rules. We need to apply that to monetary policy
Hmm.
because right now the Federal Reserve is, in a very real sense, lawless. We have
Hmm.
been dealing with lawless monetary policy for at least 20 years, and a strong argument can be made that it's been going on much longer than that. And if we want to get Americans the relief that they deserve in terms of fighting off inflation and preventing financial panics, we need to get this process under control now while there's still time.
You
That's the
said,
basic argument in the book, and we also discuss some ways to actually buy in the Fed's hands. Basically, give them a rule that forces them to act in the public interest, to basically serve those kitchen table issues that we were talking about a minute ago. So
so
I'd be happy. I'd be happy if all your listeners would go out and give that a purchase for their Christmas gifts. That would be wonderful.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Amazon's a great place. You can buy it directly from the publisher at Cambridge, but Amazon is very easily, right? Just one or two clicks.
Right.
I'm not
Right.
sure it's available at actual booksellers like Barnes and Noble, but Amazon will get it to you very quickly.
Okay, perfect. And I have noticed that Amazon is getting things very quickly, especially with all the layoffs. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the layoffs from Amazon, but I've noticed that they are still working around the clock to get us things right on time for Christmas. So, um, do you
I
have any
hadn't heard
thoughts
about the layoffs. Was there another round?
there? I had heard it was right before we did Thanksgiving. I had heard about layoffs, so I wasn't sure if you had heard any other updates, and if that is, if that is a telltale sign of what's to come for economics, or is it just, why would they do that at Christmas time is my question.
Yeah, that's a curious time to be laying people off.
Yeah.
Presumably, those workers are really going to help your production and distribution system. So, if you're letting them go just before the holidays, I have to wonder whether the initial data trickles that are coming in suggest that the usual holiday spending bump that we expect might not materialize. That might
Mhm.
portend some ominous issues for the first quarter, second quarter next year. We'll have to wait and see. I hope not. I
Right.
don't want things to go badly just because it's bad for the Democrats. These are real issues that affect real people. So I hope that the economy is strong. But if it's not, we're going to have a serious conversation about what kinds of policies and what party is ultimately best for managing the economic affairs of this nation.
Well, what we'll do is if you can come back for the first and second quarter to break it down, that would be wonderful. I would love to have you come back and talk about that. On that note, Alexander Williams Salter, contributor for Young Voices, one of my favorites. Love Young Voices. Thank you so much. I look forward to having you back. If you do you have any new articles coming out that we should be aware of? Wall Street Journal, anything like that?
I've got a few articles coming out, but
Okay.
mostly in my local newspaper here in Lubbock. I'm finishing up a series of op-eds that I've had a really good time writing. But I will be sure to let you know if anything nationally printed comes out.
Yes. Thank you so much. Many blessings to you and your family. Have a wonderful Christmas season, and we will see you soon. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Eden. God bless you and yours.
You too. Bye bye.